When a Steelers legend decides to speak up, fans stop and listen. And that's exactly what happened when Plaxico Burres let it all out on a podcast alongside other NFL heavyweights. On the other side of the equation, a veteran still surrounded by mystery might be closer than people think, even with the fan base divided and a familiar name still in the mix. Between bold opinions, controversial decisions, and heated behind-the-scenes drama, Pittsburgh's latest updates are on fire, and they could change the entire direction of the season. Go ahead and hit that like button, because this story is just getting started. Plaxico Burres, who once shined as a wideout for the Steelers, didn't hold back on the Up On Game podcast with LeVar Arrington and TJ Houshmandzadeh. And he had plenty to say about the trade that sent George Pickins to the Cowboys and brought DK Metcalf to Pittsburgh. According to Bures, fans might be excited about Metcalf, but to him, there's no debate Pickins is simply better. In my opinion, Pittsburgh didn't get better with this trade, Plaxico said. DK Metcalf is not a more complete wide receiver than George Pickens. When Pickens is locked in, he's one of the top 5 most naturally talented receivers in the league. The issue is getting his head in the right place. And that's where it gets complicated. Because as out of this world as Pickens' talent is, the numbers haven't quite stacked up against Metcalf's. In the 3 years since entering the league, Pickens has totaled 2,141 yards and 12 TDs on 174 receptions. Metcalf, in the same span, has racked up 3,154 yards and 19 touchdowns on 222 catches. Sure, DK played in a more explosive offense and had veteran status, but still the stats tell part of the story. There's also the off-field factor. Pickens had developed a reputation for being a difficult personality in the locker room, and that likely influenced the Steelers' decision. And with Metcalf arriving with a fresh 4-year, $132 million contract, Pittsburgh essentially swapped potential for stability while avoiding the risk of losing Pickens for nothing at the end of his deal. Now it's a waiting game to see if Pickens turns into the beast so many believe he can be. Bures has made his bet. Time will tell whether he was right or if the Steelers made the right call. Did the Steelers make a mistake giving up on Pickens? Drop your thoughts in the comments. But now, the quarterback situation gets even more interesting, and yes, Aaron Rodgers is part of that story. Alright, so here's the lowdown from the Steel City, where there's a whole lot of chatter about what's going on under center and why the Steelers brass isn't exactly panicking about it. Even though fans, and a certain Big Ben Roethlisberger, are a little uneasy about the idea of Mason Rudolph potentially being the guy in 2025, the vibes inside the building seem a whole lot calmer. According to ESPN insider Dan Graziano, head coach Mike Tomlin and company are sleeping just fine at night, despite the fact that Aaron Rodgers is still floating in free agency limbo. Here's the scoop. The Steelers are still feeling pretty good about their chances to land Rodgers and plug him in as QB1. They think the dude's gonna bounce back nicely now that he's another year removed from that Achilles tear that basically ruined his 2023 run with the Jets. Sure, he looked like a shell of his Hall of Fame self at times last season, but let's not forget Rodgers had a few flashes of the old magic. Like when he lit up Jacksonville for 289 yards and 3 touchdowns in Week 15, then followed it up by tossing 4 more TDs against the Dolphins in Week 18. That's not nothing. But even if Rodgers doesn't land in Pittsburgh, the Steelers aren't in full-blown panic mode, and a big reason for that is Mason Rudolph. Yeah, that Mason Rudolph, the same guy who got tossed into the fire late last season and came out swinging, leading Pittsburgh on a late-season run that punched their ticket to the playoffs. The coaching staff and locker room still have real confidence in him after that stretch. Graziano also pointed out something key. The Steelers think their defense and run game are strong enough to carry a big load. Translation? They're not banking on Rodgers turning back the clock to 2011 MVP form. They just need someone steady, not spectacular. Of course, if Rodgers officially bails on Pittsburgh's plans, expect the volume to crank up on those Kirk Cousins rumors. But for now, the Steelers seem content to ride this QB roller coaster with some patience and maybe a little quiet confidence. Swapping raw talent for stability can work, but it's a gamble. And trusting Rudolph while Rodgers is still out there? Bold or just stubborn? If you want to follow every twist and turn in the Steelers' journey, make sure to subscribe to the channel.